The email notification popped up on my phone at exactly 9:23 a.m. on a Tuesday morning that would change everything. Welcome our newest team member, Jessica Chen, who will be joining us as Senior Marketing Director. I stared at the screen, my coffee growing cold in my hands. Senior Marketing Director. My title, my position, my office that I had earned through 8 years of 60-hour weeks, countless successful campaigns, and relationships I had built from the ground up at Summit, Marketing Solutions. But here's what made this betrayal cut deeper than any knife ever could. Jessica Chen wasn't just some random hire. She was the woman my husband David had been secretly seeing for the past 4 months. The woman he thought I didn't know about. The woman who was about to discover that stealing someone's job is a lot harder than stealing their husband. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Rachel Martinez, and I've been building marketing empires since before social media was even a thing. When I started at Summit Marketing Solutions 8 years ago, we were a struggling agency with 12 employees and a handful of local clients who barely paid their bills on time. Today, we're the premier digital marketing firm in Austin, Texas, with over 40 employees and a client roster that reads like a who's who of successful businesses across the Southwest. I didn't get here by accident. While other marketing directors were focused on trending hashtags and viral content, I was building something much more valuable and much harder to replace. I was building trust. Every client relationship I cultivated was personal. I knew Patricia Williams from Williams & Associates, had a daughter starting college and worried about affording tuition. I knew Robert Hayes from Hayes Construction Group was passionate about sustainable building practices and needed a marketing strategy that reflected those values. I knew Amanda Foster from Foster Tech Solutions was a perfectionist who needed detailed reports and constant communication to feel confident in our partnership. These weren't just accounts to me. They were partnerships built on years of late-night strategy sessions, crisis management, and results that exceeded expectations. Every single time, when Patricia's biggest competitor tried to poach her customers, I developed a counter campaign that not only retained her client base, but grew it by 30%. When Robert's company faced negative publicity after a construction accident, I managed the PR crisis so effectively that his reputation actually improved. When Amanda's tech startup needed to pivot during the pandemic, I restructured her entire marketing approach and helped her company not just survive, but thrive. But apparently, none of that mattered to Michael Thompson, our CEO, when my husband, David, came to him with a proposition I was never supposed to know about. The betrayal had started innocently enough, or at least that's how David probably justified it to himself. 4 months ago, he attended a networking event for Austin tech professionals. I was supposed to go with him, but I was dealing with a client emergency that couldn't wait until morning. Amanda Foster's website had crashed during a major product launch, and I spent the entire evening coordinating with developers, managing her panic, and ensuring her launch stayed on track. David went alone, and that's where he met Jessica. 26 years old, fresh out of graduate school with an MBA and big dreams of making it in marketing. She was charming, ambitious, and impressed by David's stories about his wife who ran marketing campaigns for major companies. What started as professional networking quickly became something else entirely. I discovered the affair the way most betrayed wives do, through a combination of intuition and carelessness on his part. David had always been predictable in his routines, but suddenly he was working late 3 nights a week. He was taking phone calls in the garage. He was guarding his phone like it contained state secrets. The final confirmation came when I saw them together at Brew and Bean, the coffee shop 2 blocks from our office. They weren't just talking business. His hand was on hers across the table, and they were looking at each other the way David and I used to look at each other 10 years ago. Instead of confronting him immediately, I did what I do best. I strategized, I researched, I planned. And what I discovered was worse than just a simple affair. David wasn't just cheating on me. He was actively working to destroy my career. Through a friend who worked in HR at Summit, I learned that David had been meeting with Michael Thompson for weeks. Not as my husband, but as someone with a business proposal. Jessica, it turned out, had an impressive resume on paper. She had worked for 2 marketing firms in Dallas, though I noticed her tenures were suspiciously short. She had managed several successful campaigns, though when I dug deeper, I found that she had been part of teams rather than leading them independently. David's pitch to Michael was simple and devastating. Rachel was burned out. Rachel was expensive. Rachel was stuck in old-school marketing methods that weren't keeping up with the digital age. Jessica, on the other hand, was fresh, innovative, and available for significantly less money. She understood influencer marketing, TikTok strategies, and all the newest trends that Rachel was apparently too set in her ways to embrace. What made this betrayal particularly cruel was how David used intimate knowledge of my insecurities against me. He knew I sometimes worried about keeping up with rapidly changing digital platforms. He knew I occasionally felt overwhelmed by the pressure of managing so many high-maintenance clients. He knew I had been considering whether it was time to start a family, which meant potentially stepping back from the 80-hour weeks that had built my reputation. All of these private thoughts, shared with my husband during vulnerable moments, had been weaponized and presented to my boss as evidence that I was no longer the right person for the job I had essentially created. The morning I received that email announcing Jessica's hiring, I realized David's plan was more sophisticated than I had initially understood. This wasn't just about replacing me with his girlfriend. This was about positioning Jessica to take over my client relationships, my reputation, and my professional identity while paying her a fraction of what they were paying me. But David had made one critical miscalculation. He assumed that my client relationships were transferable. He believed that the contracts and partnerships I had built over nearly a decade were assets that belonged to Summit Marketing Solutions, not to me personally. He thought that clients worked with our agency because of our brand, our systems, and our processes. He was about to learn how wrong he was. That Tuesday morning, I sat in my office looking at the email announcement and felt something I hadn't experienced in months of knowing about David's affair. I felt calm. Not the kind of calm that comes from acceptance or resignation, but the kind of calm that comes from finally seeing the complete picture and knowing exactly what needs to be done. I picked up my phone and called Lisa Rodriguez, my assistant, and the one person at Summit who had become a genuine friend over the years. Lisa had been with the company for 5 years, and she had been instrumental in helping me manage the complex needs of our major clients. More importantly, she was someone I trusted completely. "Lisa, can you come to my office, please, and bring the Henderson Industries file? We need to discuss something important." Lisa appeared in my doorway within 2 minutes, file in hand and a concerned expression on her face. She had obviously seen the same email announcement that I had. "Rachel, what the hell is going on? Who is Jessica Chen, and why does she have your title?" I gestured for her to close the door and take a seat. "Lisa, what I'm about to tell you needs to stay between us until I say otherwise. Can you promise me that?" She nodded immediately. "Of course. You know I've got your back." Jessica Chen is the woman my husband has been having an affair with for the past 4 months, and apparently, David convinced Michael that she should replace me. Lisa's mouth fell open. "Are you serious? David did this?" It gets worse. "I think this has been planned for weeks, maybe months. The timing isn't coincidental. Jessica's hiring, the restructuring of my role, even the way the announcement was worded. This is a coordinated effort to push me out and install David's girlfriend in my position." Lisa was quiet for a long moment, processing the information. Finally, she asked the question I had been waiting for. "What are we going to do about it?" "We're going to remind Michael Thompson and everyone else at this company exactly what I've built here, and we're going to make sure that when the dust settles, they understand the difference between having Rachel Martinez on their team and trying to replace her with someone who looks good on paper but has never done the real work. The next few hours were crucial. I needed to document everything before Jessica officially started, and before Michael could begin the process of transitioning my clients to her management. I pulled files, copied contact information, and created detailed records of every client interaction, successful campaign, and relationship-building moment that had occurred over the past 8 years. More importantly, I began making phone calls, not to complain or gossip about the changes happening at Summit, but to do what I had always done best. I checked in with my clients. I asked about their current needs, their upcoming projects, and their satisfaction with our services. I listened to their concerns and reinforced the personal connections that had made our professional relationships so successful. Patricia Williams was my first call. "Rachel, I'm so glad you called. I've been meaning to reach out about the holiday campaign planning. Are we still on track for our October strategy meeting?" "Absolutely, Patricia. Actually, that's part of why I'm calling. There are some changes happening at Summit that I wanted to discuss with you personally." "What kind of changes? Please tell me you're not leaving us. You know how much we depend on your expertise." This was the moment I had been preparing for. "Patricia, I want you to know that regardless of what happens organizationally, my commitment to Williams & Associates hasn't changed. You've been more than a client to me over these past 6 years. You've been a partner." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And I don't take that lightly. "Rachel, you're starting to worry me. What's going on?" "There's going to be a new senior marketing director joining the team, and she'll likely be introduced as someone who will be taking over some of the major accounts. I wanted you to hear this from me first, and I wanted you to know that any decisions about how your account is managed should ultimately be yours to make." The conversation continued for 20 minutes. Patricia asked detailed questions about the transition, about the new director's experience, and about what this meant for the campaigns we had been planning together. By the end of the call, she had made her position clear. "Rachel, I appreciate your professionalism in handling this conversation, but I need you to understand something. Williams & Associates doesn't have a contract with Summit Marketing Solutions because of your company's reputation. We have a contract because of your reputation. If changes are being made that affect your role in managing our account, then we need to have a serious discussion about whether Summit is still the right fit for our needs." My conversation with Robert Hayes followed a similar pattern, though his response was even more direct. "Rachel, let me make this simple for you. Hayes Construction Group works with you, not your company. If Summit is making changes that reduce your involvement in our account, then we'll find a company that values what you bring to the table." Amanda Foster's reaction was the most emotional. "Rachel, you saved our company during the pandemic. You didn't just manage our marketing. You became part of our team. If Summit doesn't understand your value, then frankly, they don't deserve to represent Foster Tech Solutions." By the end of that first day, I had contacted 12 of my major clients. The responses were consistent and overwhelming. These businesses had developed partnerships with me personally, not with Summit Marketing Solutions as an entity. They trusted my judgment, valued my expertise, and had no interest in being managed by someone they had never worked with, regardless of her credentials. But I wasn't finished. The real test would come when Jessica officially started and began trying to take over the client relationships I had spent years building. I needed to be patient, professional, and strategic. I needed to let the situation play out enough for everyone to see the difference between having Rachel Martinez manage their accounts and having someone else attempt to fill those shoes. David, meanwhile, was completely oblivious to what was happening. He came home that evening expecting to find me devastated by the news of Jessica's hiring. Instead, he found me calmly cooking dinner and asking about his day. "So, did you hear about the new hire at Summit?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "I did. Jessica Chen, right? Senior Marketing Director. It'll be interesting to see how she handles the transition." David looked surprised by my calm response. "You're not upset?" "Why would I be upset, David? If Michael thinks Jessica is the right person for the role, then I'm sure she'll do fine. Change can be good for companies, keeps things fresh." What David didn't understand was that I had moved beyond being upset. I was now operating from a position of strength, armed with information he didn't know I had, and relationships he had, dramatically underestimated. The next morning, I arrived at the office early and found an email from Michael requesting a meeting to discuss the transition plan for my clients. This was it. This was the moment when David's carefully orchestrated plan would begin to unfold, and when everyone would start to understand what they had actually set in motion. As I walked toward Michael's office, I felt the same calm confidence I had experienced the day before. I had built something valuable at Summit Marketing Solutions, but what I had built wasn't really owned by the company. What I had built was owned by me, cultivated through years of genuine relationship building and consistently excellent results. Jessica Chen was about to learn the difference between having a title and having the trust and respect that comes with years of proven performance. David was about to learn that you can't transfer authentic professional relationships the same way you transfer files or office supplies. And Michael Thompson was about to discover that replacing Rachel Martinez would be a lot more complicated and expensive than he had been led to believe. Michael Thompson's office had always intimidated newer employees, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Austin and walls lined with awards from various marketing industry organizations. But I had been in this room hundreds of times over the years, presenting campaign results, discussing strategy, and solving problems that kept our agency competitive. Today felt different, though. Today, I was walking into a conversation that would determine whether 8 years of building Summit Marketing Solutions meant anything at all. Michael gestured toward the chair across from his mahogany desk, the same chair where I had sat just 6 months earlier when he offered me a partnership track that would have made me part owner of the company by next year. That conversation felt like a lifetime ago now. "Rachel, I appreciate you being so professional about this transition. I know changes like this can be challenging, but I think you'll find that Jessica brings a fresh perspective that will complement your experience perfectly." I settled into the chair and placed my hands calmly in my lap. "I'm looking forward to meeting her and learning about her background. When does she officially start?" "Monday. I thought we could spend today and tomorrow creating a comprehensive handover plan for your major accounts. Jessica will be shadowing you for the first week to understand how you manage client relationships, and then we'll begin transitioning primary responsibility to her." The word shadowing struck me as particularly interesting. In 8 years at Summit, I had never shadowed anyone. I had learned client management through trial and error, through late nights fixing problems, and through building trust one conversation at a time. The idea that Jessica could learn in a week what had taken me years to develop showed just how little Michael understood about what I actually did for this company. "That sounds reasonable," I replied. "I've been thinking about the best way to introduce Jessica to our clients. Some of them have very specific communication preferences and expectations. Patricia Williams, for example, prefers detailed written reports before every meeting, and she likes to have at least 48 hours to review materials before making decisions. Robert Hayes is the opposite. He wants brief verbal updates and hates lengthy emails. Amanda Foster needs constant reassurance and frequent check-ins, especially when we're implementing new strategies." Michael was taking notes, which surprised me. In all our previous conversations about client management, he had seemed confident that good marketing principles were universally applicable. Now he was writing down personality quirks and communication preferences as if they were crucial business intelligence. "These are exactly the kinds of insights Jessica will need," he said. "Your institutional knowledge is invaluable, Rachel. That's why this transition period is so important." "Actually, Michael, I had some thoughts about that. Rather than having Jessica shadow me with clients immediately, it might be better to have her spend the first week reviewing case studies and campaign histories. That way, when I do introduce her to clients, she'll have a solid understanding of what we've accomplished together and why certain strategies were chosen. Michael looked up from his notes. That makes sense. What kind of timeline are you thinking for the actual client introductions? This was the moment I had been preparing for. Well, that's going to depend largely on the clients themselves. I spoke with several of them yesterday to let them know changes were coming, and their responses were varied. What do you mean by varied? Patricia Williams was concerned about continuity. She's got a major campaign launch scheduled for November, and she wants to make sure the transition doesn't disrupt the timeline. Robert Hayes asked specifically about Jessica's experience with construction industry marketing. Amanda Foster was worried about having to rebuild the trust and understanding she's developed with our team over the past 4 years. Michael's pen had stopped moving. Are you saying the clients have concerns about the transition? I'm saying the clients want to be informed participants in decisions that affect their accounts. They've invested a lot of time and money in building relationships with Summit, and they want to make sure those relationships continue to serve their needs effectively. I could see Michael processing this information, and I could tell he was beginning to understand something that David had apparently not considered when pitching Jessica as my replacement. Client relationships in the marketing industry aren't just about delivering good work. They're about understanding each client's unique business challenges, communication style, risk tolerance, and long-term goals. They're about being available when crises happen, being proactive about potential problems, and being trusted to make decisions that align with the client's values and objectives. How do you think we should handle their concerns? Michael asked. I think we should let Jessica prove herself gradually. Maybe start with smaller accounts or supporting roles on major accounts until she's demonstrated that she can deliver the same level of service our clients expect. That's not really what we discussed, Rachel. The plan was for Jessica to take over your major accounts so you could focus on business development and strategic planning. This was news to me. Business development and strategic planning? Yes, we talked about creating a new role for you. Director of Strategic Initiatives. You'd be responsible for identifying new market opportunities, developing long-term agency strategy, and mentoring junior staff members. I sat quietly for a moment, processing what Michael had just revealed. David's plan wasn't just to replace me with Jessica. It was to completely restructure my role in a way that removed me from client contact while making it sound like a promotion. Director of Strategic Initiatives was a title that sounded impressive, but would effectively make me irrelevant to the day-to-day operations that I had built my reputation on. Michael, can I ask you something directly? Of course. Whose idea was this restructuring? Because 6 months ago, you were talking about making me a partner. Now you're talking about moving me away from client management entirely. That's a significant change in direction. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Rachel, you know I value your contributions to this company, but we have to think about the future. Jessica brings expertise in areas where we need to grow: social media strategy, influencer partnerships, digital advertising platforms that appeal to younger demographics. These are areas where Summit needs to evolve. And you don't think I can evolve? It's not that you can't evolve. It's that your time might be better spent on higher-level strategic work rather than managing the day-to-day details of client campaigns. I realized that Michael was repeating almost word for word the same arguments that David must have made during their private meetings. The language about evolution, about higher-level strategic work, about focusing on areas where Summit needed to grow, these weren't Michael's ideas. These were David's talking points, delivered through Michael but originating from someone who knew exactly which of my professional insecurities to target. I appreciate the confidence in my strategic abilities, I said carefully. But I'm curious about something. Has Jessica actually managed major accounts like Williams & Associates, or Hayes Construction Group. Because those aren't just social media and digital advertising accounts. They're comprehensive marketing partnerships that involve everything, from crisis communications to long-term brand development. Jessica has experience with large accounts, Michael replied, but his tone suggested he wasn't entirely confident in that statement. What kind of large accounts? Michael consulted his notes. She managed the digital marketing for Prestige Automotive Group in Dallas. That's a multi-million-dollar account. I knew Prestige Automotive Group. They were a chain of luxury car dealerships that primarily focused on social media advertising and influencer partnerships, exactly the kind of work that Jessica's resume highlighted. But managing social media campaigns for car dealerships was fundamentally different from managing comprehensive marketing strategies for construction companies, law firms, and tech startups. That's impressive, I said. Did she manage the full marketing strategy for Prestige, or specifically their digital advertising? Michael was quiet for a moment. I believe it was primarily digital advertising and social media management. So she hasn't actually managed comprehensive marketing partnerships with major B2B clients. Rachel, I'm not sure where you're going with this line of questioning. I leaned forward slightly. Michael, I'm trying to understand how we're going to set Jessica up for success. Managing Patricia Williams's account isn't just about creating social media content. It's about understanding legal marketing ethics, crafting messaging that builds trust with potential clients who are dealing with serious legal issues, and coordinating with her referral partners to ensure consistent branding across multiple touchpoints. That's not something you learn from managing car dealership Instagram accounts. I could see the wheels turning in Michael's mind. For the first time since this conversation began, he seemed to be questioning whether the transition plan he had agreed to was actually feasible. What are you suggesting, Rachel? I'm suggesting that we need to be realistic about timelines and expectations. If Jessica is going to successfully manage major accounts, she needs more than a week of shadowing. She needs months of hands-on experience with guidance and support. And honestly, some of our clients may not be willing to accept that learning curve. Michael set down his pen and looked directly at me. Are you saying our clients might leave if we transition their accounts to Jessica? This was the question I had been waiting for him to ask. I'm saying our clients are sophisticated business owners who have options. They work with Summit because they get results and because they trust the people managing their accounts. If they don't feel confident in the transition, they'll find another agency that can provide the same level of service they're accustomed to. But they have contracts. They have contracts that can be terminated with 30 days' notice if they're unsatisfied with the service. And Michael, most of our major clients have been approached by other agencies multiple times over the years. The only reason they've stayed with Summit is because of the relationships we've built and the results we've delivered. The silence in the room stretched for nearly a minute. I could see Michael running calculations in his head, trying to figure out what percentage of our revenue was tied to the clients I managed and what it would mean for the company if even a few of them decided to leave. How many clients do you think might have concerns about the transition? Honestly, most of them. Not because they don't want to work with Jessica, but because they don't want to start over with someone who doesn't understand their business, their history with Summit, or their specific needs and preferences. Michael rubbed his temples. This is more complicated than I anticipated. It doesn't have to be complicated, I said. We just need to approach it strategically. Let Jessica start with some of our smaller accounts or take supporting roles on major accounts. Let her prove herself gradually while maintaining continuity for our biggest clients. If she's as talented as her resume suggests, she'll earn the client's confidence over time. But that's not really the structure we discussed. The plan was for you to move into the strategic role and for Jessica to take over your current responsibilities. I took a deep breath. Michael, can I be completely honest with you about something? He nodded. I love working with clients. I love solving their problems, developing strategies that help their businesses grow, and building relationships that last for years. The idea of moving into a purely strategic role, removed from client contact, isn't appealing to me. It feels like being promoted away from the work I'm actually passionate about. This was the truth, but not the complete truth. What I didn't tell Michael was that I suspected the Director of Strategic Initiatives role was designed to make me irrelevant until they could justify eliminating my position entirely. What I also didn't tell him was that I had already begun exploring other options, including the possibility of starting my own agency with the clients who were loyal to me personally rather than to Summit. I understand your perspective, Rachel, but we also have to think about what's best for the company's growth and development. Of course. And I think what's best for the company is ensuring that our major clients remain satisfied and continue to see value in working with Summit. If we rush this transition and lose clients as a result, that hurts everyone. Michael was quiet again, clearly wrestling with competing priorities. On one hand, he had made commitments to Jessica and had apparently bought into David's vision of restructuring my role. On the other hand, he was beginning to understand that the transition might be more risky than he had initially realized. "What would you recommend as a compromise?" he asked finally. "Give Jessica 3 months to prove herself with smaller accounts and supporting roles. Let her demonstrate that she can deliver the same quality of work and client satisfaction that Summit is known for. During that time, I'll continue managing our major accounts while also mentoring Jessica and helping her understand our client management approach. After 3 months, we can reassess and make decisions about expanding her responsibilities based on her performance and client feedback." It was a reasonable proposal, and I could see that Michael recognized it as such. But I could also see him calculating whether this compromise would satisfy whatever commitments he had made to David and Jessica. "I'll need to think about this and discuss it with Jessica when she starts on Monday. She's expecting to take on significant responsibilities immediately." "I understand. But Michael, I think it's important to manage everyone's expectations realistically. Jessica's success at Summit depends on our client's confidence in her abilities. If we set her up to fail by giving her responsibilities she's not prepared for, we're not doing her any favors." Michael nodded slowly. "You're right. Let me talk to her about adjusting the timeline and approach." As I stood to leave his office, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and apprehension. I had successfully planted seeds of doubt about the wisdom of rushing Jessica into my role, and I had positioned myself as the reasonable voice advocating for a measured approach. But I also knew that this was just the beginning of a much larger battle. David had clearly invested significant time and effort in convincing Michael that this restructuring was necessary and beneficial. Jessica was expecting to step into a senior role with major responsibilities, and I was walking a fine line between protecting my interests and appearing to be a team player. The real test would come on Monday when Jessica started and began trying to understand what managing major marketing accounts actually involved. I had a feeling that the gap between her expectations and reality would become apparent very quickly. That evening, I arrived home to find David cooking dinner, which was unusual enough to immediately put me on alert. In 10 years of marriage, David cooked maybe once a month, and usually only when he was feeling guilty about something or wanted to soften me up for bad news. "How was your day?" he asked, not looking up from the stove. "Interesting. I had a long meeting with Michael about the transition plan for Jessica." David's stirring motion paused for just a fraction of a second. "Oh? How did that go?" "It went well. We discussed timelines and approaches for introducing her to our major clients. It's going to be a gradual process to make sure everyone feels comfortable with the changes." "Ah, that makes sense," David said, but I could hear the tension in his voice. "Jessica is really excited about the opportunity. She's been preparing for weeks." This was the first time David had mentioned Jessica's preparation directly to me, and it confirmed what I had suspected. This transition had been planned for much longer than anyone had officially acknowledged. I'm sure she is excited. It's a great opportunity for someone at her career stage. David finally turned to look at me. You're being very understanding. About all this, Rachel. I wasn't sure how you'd react to having someone new join the team in such a senior role. I met his gaze steadily. Change is part of business, David. Good people adapt. What I didn't say was that I was very good at adapting, and that my adaptation might not look the way he expected it to. David had orchestrated this situation assuming that I would either accept the diminished role gracefully or react emotionally, in a way that would justify his narrative about me being difficult to work with. Instead, I was doing what I had always done best. I was thinking strategically, building relationships, and positioning myself to control the outcome rather than simply react to it. Monday morning was going to be very interesting. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October air that made Austin feel alive with possibility. I had spent the weekend preparing detailed files for each major client, complete with communication preferences, campaign histories, and strategic notes. That would help Jessica understand the complexity of what she was about to inherit. It was thorough, professional, and exactly the kind of documentation that would demonstrate just how much work went into managing these relationships effectively. I arrived at the office at 7:30, 90 minutes before Jessica was scheduled to start. Lisa was already at her desk, which didn't surprise me. Over the years, we had developed an unspoken understanding about important days, and she knew that today would require careful attention to every detail. Good morning, Rachel. Are you ready for this? As ready as anyone can be for watching someone else try to do your job, I replied, settling into my office with a cup of coffee that I suspected I would need more than usual. At exactly 9 o'clock, Michael appeared in my doorway with Jessica beside him. My first impression was that she looked younger than I had expected, despite being 26. She had long black hair styled in loose waves, and she was wearing a navy blue dress that was professional, but perhaps a bit too fashionable for a first day in a conservative marketing environment. Her smile was confident, almost eager, and I could see why David had been attracted to her enthusiasm. Rachel, I'd like you to meet Jessica Chen. Jessica, this is Rachel Martinez, our senior marketing director who will be working with you during the transition. Jessica extended her hand with a firm grip. Rachel, it's such a pleasure to meet you. I've heard so much about the incredible work you've done here at Summit. I'm really looking forward to learning from your experience. The irony of her statement wasn't lost on me. She had heard about my work, but probably not from professional sources. More likely, she had heard about it from David during Pillow talk sessions where my career achievements were discussed in the context of why I needed to be replaced. Welcome to Summit, Jessica. I've prepared some materials that should help you understand how we manage our client relationships here. Why don't we start with an overview of our major accounts? We spent the next 2 hours in my office with Jessica taking notes as I walked through each client's history, preferences, and current projects. She asked intelligent questions, which I had to admit surprised me slightly. Whatever else might be true about her qualifications, she wasn't completely unprepared for marketing work. Patricia Williams has been with us for 6 years, I explained, pulling up her file on my computer. She's a personal injury attorney, which means her marketing needs are very specific. Legal advertising has strict ethical guidelines, so we have to be careful about claims and messaging. She also serves a lot of clients who are dealing with traumatic situations, so the tone of all communications needs to be compassionate and trustworthy, rather than aggressive or salesy. Jessica nodded, writing notes. What kind of campaigns have been most successful for her? Content marketing has been huge. We've helped her develop a blog that positions her as an expert in personal injury law, while also providing genuinely helpful information for people who've been in accidents. We also do a lot of community sponsorship, supporting local events and charities that align with her values. Patricia isn't just trying to generate leads, She's trying to build a reputation as someone who cares about her community. That's really thoughtful, Jessica said. In Dallas, most of the legal marketing I saw was much more direct. Billboards, radio ads, that kind of thing. Those approaches can work in certain markets, but Patricia's practice is built on referrals and long-term relationships. She'd rather have 10 clients who trust her completely than 100 clients who chose her because of a catchy billboard. We moved on to Robert Hayes and his construction company. Jessica seemed particularly interested in this account, probably because construction marketing was further outside her comfort zone than legal services. Robert's business is all about relationships and reputation, I explained. Construction projects can take months or years, and there's a lot of money at stake. His clients need to trust that he'll deliver quality work on time and on budget. Our marketing for Hayes Construction focuses heavily on showcasing completed projects, client testimonials, and Robert's expertise in sustainable building practices. How do you measure success for an account like that? Jessica asked. It's mostly about lead quality rather than lead quantity. Robert would rather get 5 serious inquiries from qualified prospects than 50 casual inquiries from people who aren't ready to commit to a major construction project. We track things like inquiry to consultation conversion rates, consultation to contract conversion rates, and the average project value of clients who come through our marketing efforts. Jessica was writing furiously, and I could see her beginning to understand that managing B2B marketing accounts required a completely different approach than the B2C social media campaigns she was accustomed to. This is a lot more complex than I expected, she admitted. It's different for every client, I replied. That's why the relationships take time to build. You have to understand not just their industry, but their specific business model, their values, and their long-term goals. At 11 o'clock, Michael stopped by to check on our progress. How's the orientation going? Really well, Jessica replied enthusiastically. Rachel has been incredibly thorough. I'm starting to understand how sophisticated these client relationships are. Michael looked pleased. Excellent. Rachel, do you think Jessica is ready to start sitting in on client calls? This was the moment I had been anticipating. I think it would be valuable for Jessica to observe some client interactions, but I'd recommend starting with internal strategy meetings first. That way, she can see how we develop campaign ideas and make strategic decisions before she's in front of clients. That makes sense, Jessica agreed. I'd love to understand your creative process. Perfect, Michael said. Rachel, you have the Henderson Industries strategy meeting at 2 o'clock, right? Why don't you have Jessica observe that? Henderson Industries was one of our mid-sized accounts, significant enough to be meaningful, but not so crucial that any mistakes would be catastrophic. It was a perfect testing ground for Jessica's first client exposure. That sounds ideal, I replied. Henderson is launching a new product line next quarter, so we'll be discussing campaign strategy and timeline. It'll give Jessica a good sense of how we approach new challenges. The Henderson Industries meeting went smoothly, with Jessica observing quietly as I walked through campaign options with Tom Henderson and his marketing manager. She took detailed notes and asked a few clarifying questions afterward, demonstrating that she had been paying attention and understood the basic concepts we had discussed. That was really insightful, she told me as we walked back to my office. I can see how much preparation goes into each client interaction. You knew details about their industry trends, their competitors, and their internal challenges that went way beyond just marketing. That's the difference between being a marketing vendor and being a marketing partner, I explained. Tom doesn't just want someone to execute campaigns for him. He wants someone who understands his business well enough to anticipate problems and suggest solutions he might not have considered. Jessica nodded thoughtfully. How long did it take you to develop that level of insight into his business? About 18 months of working together closely. The first 6 months were mostly about proving we could execute campaigns effectively. The next year was about building trust and demonstrating that we understood his strategic objectives. Now we're at the point where he asks for my input on business decisions that go beyond marketing. I could see Jessica processing this timeline and beginning to understand that client relationships couldn't be transferred overnight. What I had built with Tom Henderson and our other major clients was the result of years of consistent performance, strategic thinking, and personal trust. Tuesday brought Jessica's first real test. Patricia Williams had requested a meeting to discuss her holiday marketing campaign, and I decided it was time for Jessica to meet one of our most important clients in person. Patricia can be intimidating at first, I warned Jessica as we prepared for the meeting. She's incredibly smart, very detail-oriented, and she doesn't suffer fools gladly. But she's also fair and loyal once she decides she can trust you. Any specific things I should know before meeting her? Don't try to impress her with industry jargon or trendy marketing concepts. Patricia cares about results and authenticity. Be yourself, listen more than you talk, and if you don't know something, admit it rather than trying to fake your way through. Patricia arrived at exactly 2 o'clock, as she always did. She was in her early 50s, impeccably dressed, and had the kind of commanding presence that made her successful in courtrooms. I had learned over the years that Patricia's intimidating exterior concealed someone who was genuinely caring and deeply committed to helping her clients. Patricia, I'd like you to meet Jessica Chen, who's joining our team as a senior marketing director. Jessica, this is Patricia Williams. Patricia shook Jessica's hand and studied her with the same intensity she probably used when evaluating potential jury members. Nice to meet you, Jessica. Rachel has been telling me about some changes happening at Summit. What's your background? I most recently worked with Prestige Automotive Group in Dallas, managing their digital marketing and social media campaigns. Before that, I was with Morrison Digital, where I focused on influencer partnerships and content marketing. Patricia nodded politely. And what attracted you to legal marketing? It's quite different from automotive and retail. Jessica glanced at me briefly before answering. I'm excited about the challenge of working in a more complex industry. Legal services require a more sophisticated approach to marketing, which appeals to me professionally. It was a diplomatic answer, but I could tell Patricia wasn't entirely convinced. She had built her practice on reading people accurately, and she was clearly trying to understand Jessica's motivations and qualifications. Ooh, Rachel, why don't you walk us through the holiday campaign concepts you've developed? For the next 45 minutes, I presented 3 different campaign approaches for Patricia's end-of-year marketing push. Jessica observed and occasionally asked clarifying questions, but she was clearly out of her depth when it came to the specific requirements of legal advertising. I like the community focus of the second option, Patricia said, but I'm concerned about the timeline. Can we really execute a campaign of that scope by Thanksgiving? Absolutely, I replied. We'll need to finalize creative concepts by next Friday and have all materials approved by the Bar Association within 2 weeks, but that's manageable if we start immediately. Patricia turned to Jessica. What's your take on the timeline concerns? Jessica hesitated for a moment. I think Rachel's assessment is accurate. The timeline is tight, but it's achievable with proper planning and execution. It was a safe answer, but it demonstrated that Jessica didn't have enough experience to offer meaningful input on project management or regulatory approval processes. After Patricia left, Jessica and I debriefed the meeting in my office. That was intimidating, she admitted. Patricia is every bit as sharp as you warned me she'd be. She liked you, I replied, which was mostly true. She was testing you, but she wasn't hostile. That's a good sign. I felt like I was in over my head when she asked about the timeline. I don't have experience with Bar Association approval processes or legal advertising regulations. That's understandable. Those are specialized areas that take time to learn. The important thing is that you were honest about what you knew and what you didn't know. Wednesday brought our first real crisis. Amanda Foster called at 8:30 in the morning, clearly agitated about something that had happened with her website overnight. "Rachel, we have a problem. Our main landing page is showing a 404 error, and I'm getting calls from potential customers who can't access our product information. This is a disaster." I immediately started troubleshooting while Jessica observed. "Amanda, let me check with our development team to see what happened. In the meantime, can you redirect traffic to your secondary product pages?" "I don't know how to do that. Can you walk me through it?" For the next 2 hours, I coordinated between Amanda, our web development team, and our hosting provider to diagnose and fix the problem. Jessica watched the entire process, taking notes and asking questions when appropriate. "Is this typical?" she asked during a brief break in the crisis management. "Crisis management is part of the job," I replied. "When you're managing comprehensive marketing relationships, you become the go-to person when anything goes wrong with a client's marketing systems." Amanda doesn't have a full-time IT department, so she relies on us to coordinate technical solutions. By 11 o'clock, we had resolved the website issue and implemented backup systems to prevent similar problems in the future. Amanda was grateful and relieved, and the crisis had actually strengthened our relationship by demonstrating our reliability under pressure. I had no idea client management involved so much technical problem solving, Jessica observed. "It depends on the client, but yes. When you're managing marketing partnerships rather than just executing campaigns, you become responsible for the entire client experience. That includes everything from creative development to technical troubleshooting to strategic planning." Thursday afternoon brought the conversation I had been expecting since Jessica started. Michael called me into his office to discuss how the transition was progressing. "How do you think Jessica is adapting to the role?" he asked. I chose my words carefully. "She's intelligent and eager to learn, which are great qualities. She's also beginning to understand how different B2B relationship management is from the B2C work she's done previously. Is she ready to start taking over some client responsibilities?" "Michael, I think Jessica needs more time to develop the specialized knowledge our major clients expect. Legal marketing, construction industry expertise, crisis management. These aren't skills you develop in a week or two." Michael looked concerned. "How much more time are we talking about?" "Honestly, several months for her to feel confident managing major accounts independently. Maybe longer for clients like Patricia Williams, who have very specific expectations and low tolerance for learning curves." "That's much longer than we discussed originally." "I know, but I'd rather set realistic expectations than set Jessica up to fail. Our major clients represent significant revenue for Summit. We can't afford to lose them because we rushed someone into responsibilities they weren't prepared for." Michael was quiet for a long moment. Jessica has been asking about when she can start leading client meetings independently. "She can probably handle some of our smaller accounts fairly soon," I replied. "But accounts like Williams and Associates, Hayes Construction, and Foster Tech, those require expertise that takes time to develop." "This is creating a problem, Rachel. Jessica was hired to take over your major responsibilities so you could focus on strategic initiatives. If she can't do that for several months, we're not achieving the restructuring we planned." I had been waiting for this moment. "Michael, maybe the timeline for restructuring needs to be adjusted based on what we've learned this week. Jessica is talented, but she needs time to develop. Rushing her into major responsibilities could hurt both her confidence and our client relationships." "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we let Jessica prove herself gradually while maintaining continuity for our most important clients. It's better for everyone: Jessica, our clients, and Summit." Michael rubbed his temples, clearly frustrated with how complicated this transition had become. I suspected he was beginning to understand that David's plan had been based on assumptions that weren't holding up to reality. Friday brought the week's biggest revelation. Jessica asked if she could speak with me privately, and I could tell from her expression that something significant was on her mind. "Rachel, Can I ask you something? Personal. Of course. Your husband, David. He told me that you were planning to step back from client work anyway, that you were burned out and looking for a change. But this week, watching you work with clients, you don't seem burned out at all. You seem energized by it. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. David told you I was burned out? He said you had been complaining about the stress of managing so many demanding clients and that you were ready for a change. He made it sound like this transition would be a relief for you. So there it was. David hadn't just convinced Michael that I needed to be replaced. He had convinced Jessica that she was doing me a favor by taking over my responsibilities. Jessica, what exactly did David tell you about me and my feelings about work? She looked uncomfortable, clearly beginning to realize she had stepped into something complicated. He said you were struggling to keep up with the demands of modern marketing and that you would be happier focusing on strategic work rather than day-to-day client management. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my professional composure while processing the full scope of David's manipulation. He had created a narrative that painted me as inadequate, outdated, and secretly grateful to be replaced. He had used this narrative to justify the transition to both Michael and Jessica, making everyone feel like they were doing me a favor rather than undermining my career. Jessica, I need you to understand something. I love working with clients. It's the most fulfilling part of my job. I'm not burned out, and I'm not looking to step back from client work. This transition wasn't my idea. Jessica's face went pale, but David said, he made it sound like you had asked for help because you were overwhelmed. David said a lot of things that weren't true. We sat in silence for a moment while Jessica processed this information. I could see her beginning to understand that she had been brought into a situation that was much more complicated than she had been led to believe. Jessica's revelation about David's lies had shifted something fundamental in the dynamic between us. Over the weekend, I found myself replaying our conversation and wondering how deep David's deception actually went. If he had lied to Jessica about my feelings toward work, what else had he lied about? More importantly, how long had he been planning this elaborate scheme to replace me professionally while maintaining the facade of a supportive husband? Monday morning brought answers I wasn't prepared for. Jessica arrived at the office early and immediately asked to speak with me privately. She looked like she hadn't slept well, and there was something in her expression that suggested she had spent the weekend doing some investigating of her own. Rachel, I need to tell you something, and I don't think you're going to like what you hear. I gestured for her to sit down and close the door. Whatever she had discovered, it was clearly significant enough to make her uncomfortable. I spent the weekend thinking about our conversation on Friday, and some things weren't adding up. So I called my friend Sarah, who still works at Morrison Digital, my previous agency. I asked her to do some research on Summit Marketing Solutions and your reputation in the industry. I waited, sensing that Jessica was building up to something important. Rachel, everyone in the Dallas marketing community knows who you are. Sarah said you're considered one of the best client relationships managers in Texas. She said agencies have been trying to recruit you for years, but you're known for being incredibly loyal to Summit. When I told her about the transition and the story David had told me about you being burned out, she laughed. She said there was no way Rachel Martinez was burned out or looking to step back from client work. Jessica paused, clearly struggling with what to say next. Then Sarah told me something else. She said Morrison Digital actually approached you about a partnership opportunity 6 months ago. They wanted to offer you a stake in their Austin expansion, but you turned them down because you were committed to building something at Summit. I felt my stomach drop. The Morrison Digital conversation had been completely confidential. I had never mentioned it to anyone at Summit, not even Lisa. The only person I had discussed it with was David during a late-night conversation about our future goals and whether I should consider other opportunities. How would Sarah know about that conversation? I asked, though I was beginning to suspect the answer. That's what I was wondering too. So I asked her directly. She said David reached out to Morrison Digital last month, asking if they were still interested in bringing you on board. He told them you were ready to make a change, but were too loyal to Summit to initiate the conversation yourself. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. David hadn't just been planning to replace me at Summit. He had been setting up a backup plan in case his primary strategy didn't work. If Michael had refused to hire Jessica, or if the transition had failed, David would have been able to claim that I was leaving anyway for a better opportunity. Either way, he would have succeeded in removing me from my position at Summit. There's more, Jessica continued. David told Morrison Digital that you were dealing with some personal issues that were affecting your work performance, and that a change of scenery might be beneficial for your career and your marriage. I sat back in my chair, trying to process the full scope of David's manipulation. He had been systematically undermining my professional reputation while positioning himself as a concerned husband who was looking out for my best interests. He had created multiple scenarios that would result in my departure from Summit, ensuring that his plan would succeed regardless of how individual pieces played out. Jessica, did David ever discuss his relationship with you when he was talking to Morrison Digital or Michael? She shook her head. Not directly. But Sarah said David implied that he was worried about you, and that he thought a career change might help with some marital stress you'd been experiencing. So, David had even managed to use our marriage problems that he had created through his affair, as justification for his professional sabotage. He had turned his betrayal into evidence that I was unstable and in need of career changes that would conveniently benefit his girlfriend. Jessica, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to be completely honest with me. She nodded. How long have you and David been involved? Jessica's face flushed red. About 4 months. But Rachel, you have to understand, he told me your marriage was already over. He said you two had been living separate lives for over a year, and that you were both ready to move on. 4 months. That meant David had started his affair with Jessica and begun planning my professional downfall simultaneously. The relationship and the career sabotage were part of the same calculated strategy. Did David ever suggest that you apply for positions at Summit? Yes, but not initially. At first, he just talked about Summit as a great agency where I might want to work someday. Then, about 6 weeks ago, he mentioned that there might be opportunities opening up soon. He helped me tailor my resume and prepare for the interview process. And he never mentioned that the opportunity might involve replacing his wife? Jessica was quiet for a long moment. Not directly. He said there was a senior marketing director who might be transitioning to a different role, but he never said it was you until after I was already hired. I realized that David had been even more manipulative than I had initially understood. He had cultivated Jessica's interest in Summit before revealing that she would be replacing me, making it harder for her to back out once she understood the full situation. He had also kept her partially in the dark about my identity until it was too late for her to reconsider her decision. Jessica, what do you want to do with this information? She looked directly at me. I want to do the right thing. I came to Summit because I thought I was getting a great opportunity to advance my career. I didn't realize I was part of someone's scheme to destroy their wife's professional life. I could see that Jessica was genuinely distressed by what she had discovered. Whatever her motivations for getting involved with David initially, she clearly hadn't understood that she was being used as a weapon against me. I appreciate your honesty, I said. But this situation is complicated for everyone involved. You have a job here now, and you deserve the chance to succeed based on your own merits. But this whole thing was based on lies. David lied to me. He lied to Michael, and he's been lying to you. How can I build a career on that foundation? It was a fair question, and I found myself respecting Jessica's integrity more than I had expected to. She could have chosen to ignore David's deception and focus on advancing her own interests. Instead, she was grappling with the ethical implications of benefiting from someone else's manipulation. "What matters now is what we do going forward," I said. "David's lies got us into this situation, but we don't have to let his lies control how we handle it." That afternoon, I received a call that changed everything. Robert Hayes from Hayes Construction Group was on the line, and he sounded agitated. "Rachel, I need to talk to you about something that's been bothering me. I got a call this morning from someone at Apex Marketing Group asking if I'd be interested in discussing their services. Normally, I'd just decline and move on. But they knew details about my business and my marketing history that seemed too specific to be coincidental. Apex Marketing Group was Summit's biggest competitor in the Austin market. They had been trying to poach our clients for years, but they had never been successful because of the strong relationships we had built. "What kind of details did they know?" I asked. "They knew about the sustainability initiatives we're planning for next year, the budget concerns I mentioned to you last month, and even some of the messaging strategy we discussed for the industrial sector campaign. Rachel, the only people who should know that information are you, me, and my internal team." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Robert, can you give me some time to look into this? I want to understand how they got that information before we discuss next steps." "Of course, but Rachel, I'm concerned about information security. If details about my business strategy are being shared with competitors, we have a serious problem." After I hung up, I immediately called Lisa into my office. "I need you to help me with something sensitive. Robert Hayes just told me that Apex Marketing Group contacted him with detailed information about his business that should be confidential. I need to figure out how they got that information." Lisa's expression darkened. "Rachel, there's something I need to tell you. I didn't want to worry you unnecessarily, but I've noticed some unusual activity in our client files recently." "What kind of activity?" "Someone has been accessing client files outside of normal business hours. The system logs show login activity on evenings and weekends when most staff members aren't here." "Can you tell who's been accessing the files?" Lisa pulled up the system logs on her computer. "The logins are all under your user account, but Rachel, I know you haven't been here during these times because I've seen you leave the office. Someone had been using my login credentials to access confidential client information after hours. Given the timing and the nature of the information leak, there was only one person who had both the access and the motivation to steal client data. Lisa, I need you to change all of my passwords immediately and document every instance of unauthorized access. Then I need you to call Michael and tell him we have a security breach that requires immediate attention." Within an hour, Michael was in my office reviewing the system logs with Lisa and me. His expression grew more serious with each unauthorized login we identified. "This is a major security breach," he said. "If client information has been compromised, we could face legal liability and loss of client trust." "Michael, there's something else you need to know," I said. Robert Hayes received a call from Apex Marketing Group this morning. They had detailed information about his business strategy that could only have come from our internal files. Michael sat back in his chair. "Are you suggesting that someone at Summit has been feeding information to our competitors?" "I'm suggesting that someone with access to our systems has been stealing client data. Whether they're sharing it with competitors or using it for other purposes, I don't know. But the unauthorized access coincides with sensitive information being shared outside the company." "Who has your login credentials?" This was the question I had been dreading. "Michael, the only person who would have access to my passwords, is my husband David. I've never shared my login information with anyone else." The silence in the room was deafening. Michael was clearly processing the implications of what I had just revealed. "Are you saying David has been accessing client files without authorization?" "I'm saying someone has been using my credentials to access files after hours, and David is the only person who would have that access." Given his involvement in Jessica's hiring and his knowledge of our client relationships, it's possible he's been gathering information for purposes that aren't in Summit's best interests. Michael rubbed his forehead. This is getting very complicated, Rachel. I know, but we have a responsibility to protect our clients' confidential information. If there's been a breach, we need to address it immediately. That evening, I confronted David directly. I waited until after dinner, when we were both settled in the living room, before bringing up the subject. David, I need to ask you about something serious. He looked up from his laptop. What's going on? We discovered unauthorized access to client files at Summit. Someone has been logging into the system using my credentials after hours and accessing confidential client information. David's expression didn't change, but I noticed his hands pause on the keyboard. That sounds like a serious security issue. Have you reported it to IT? We've documented everything. But David, you're the only person who has access to my passwords. I need to know if you've been logging into Summit systems. Now his expression did change. I saw a flash of something. Panic, anger, calculation, before he composed himself. Rachel, why would I access your work systems? I have my own job and my own responsibilities. That's not an answer to my question. Have you used my login credentials to access Summit's client files? David closed his laptop and looked directly at me. Are you accusing me of corporate espionage? I'm asking you a direct question about unauthorized system access. Yes or no? Have you been logging into Summit systems using my credentials? The silence stretched between us for nearly a minute. Finally, David spoke. I may have logged in a few times to check on things. I was worried about you, Rachel. You've been under a lot of stress lately, and I wanted to make sure you weren't missing important deadlines or client communications. It was a lie, and we both knew it. But it was also an admission that he had been accessing the systems without authorization. David, what you're describing is a federal crime. Unauthorized access to computer systems, theft of proprietary information, and potentially corporate espionage. Do you understand the seriousness of what you've just admitted to? David's facade finally cracked. Don't be dramatic, Rachel. I was looking out for your best interests. By stealing client information and potentially sharing it with competitors? I never shared anything with competitors. Then how did Apex Marketing Group get detailed information about Robert Hayes' business strategy? Information that was only discussed in internal meetings and documented in confidential files? David was quiet again, clearly trying to calculate his next move. I don't know anything about Apex Marketing Group, he said finally. David, this isn't going away. Summit is conducting a full investigation into the security breach. If you've been involved in any unauthorized access or information sharing, it's going to be discovered. Are you threatening me? I'm telling you that your actions have consequences. Client confidentiality is sacred in our industry. If you've compromised that confidentiality, you've potentially destroyed relationships that took years to build. David stood up abruptly. I think you're overreacting to a minor security issue because you're stressed about the changes at work. Minor security issue? David, Robert Hayes is considering terminating his contract because his confidential information was leaked to competitors. That's a six-figure account that represents years of relationship building. Maybe Robert would be better off with a different agency anyway. The callousness of that statement took my breath away. David was willing to destroy my professional relationships and damage Summit's reputation to advance his own agenda. Get out, I said quietly. What? Get out of this house. Go stay with Jessica or find a hotel, but I want you gone tonight. David's expression shifted to one of genuine surprise. Rachel, you're being irrational. I'm being protective of my professional integrity and my client's confidential information. You've admitted to unauthorized system access, and client data has been compromised. I can't have you in this house where you might have access to additional sensitive information. This is my house too. This is my house, David. My name is on the deed, my income pays the mortgage, and my professional reputation is what's at stake here. Either you leave voluntarily, or I call the police and report the unauthorized system access. David stared at me for a long moment, clearly trying to decide whether I was bluffing. Fine, he said finally. But this conversation isn't over. Yes, it is. As I watched David pack a bag and leave, I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. I had finally taken action to protect myself and my clients, but I knew this was just the beginning of a much larger battle. The next morning brought a call from Patricia Williams that I had been expecting but dreading. Rachel, I received an interesting phone call yesterday from Apex Marketing Group. They seem to know quite a bit about my practice and my marketing needs. I'm concerned about how they obtained that information. Patricia, I'm aware of the situation, and Summit is conducting a full investigation into how confidential client information may have been compromised. Rachel, I need to be direct with you. Williams & Associates has built our relationship with Summit based on trust and confidentiality. If that trust has been broken, we need to reconsider our partnership. This was the moment I had been preparing, for since the security breach was discovered, Patricia was well within her rights to terminate her contract, and frankly, I couldn't blame her for considering it. I understand your concerns completely, I said. What can I do to help restore your confidence in our ability to protect your confidential information? I want to know exactly what information was compromised, how it was compromised, and what steps Summit is taking to prevent future breaches. I'll have a complete report for you by the end of the week. Patricia, I also want you to know that this breach appears to be the result of unauthorized access by someone outside of Summit's normal operations. This wasn't a failure of our internal security protocols. What does that mean? It means someone gained access to our systems through compromised credentials rather than through any weakness in our security infrastructure. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Rachel, are you telling me this was an inside job? I'm telling you that we believe someone with access to employee credentials used that access to steal client information. We're working with cybersecurity experts to determine the full scope of the breach and ensure it can't happen again. I appreciate your transparency, but Rachel, I need you to understand that this situation has put our entire relationship in jeopardy. Williams & Associates can't work with an agency that can't protect our confidential information. After I hung up, I realized that David's sabotage had achieved exactly what he had intended. Even if Jessica proved to be incompetent at managing major accounts, the security breach he had orchestrated would likely result in client departures that would justify my removal from Summit. But David had made one critical miscalculation. He had assumed that the clients would stay with Summit regardless of who managed their accounts. He hadn't considered the possibility that clients like Patricia Williams, Robert Hayes, and Amanda Foster were more loyal to me personally than they were to the agency. By Wednesday, the full scope of the crisis had become clear. 3 major clients had requested meetings to discuss the security breach. 2 smaller clients had already terminated their contracts, and Jessica was beginning to understand that managing client relationships during a crisis was far more complex than anything she had experienced in her previous roles. Rachel, I don't think I'm prepared for this, she admitted during a private conversation. Patricia Williams asked me technical questions about data security that I couldn't answer. Robert Hayes wanted assurances about confidentiality protocols that I don't even understand. This is way beyond digital marketing and social media campaigns. I could see that Jessica was genuinely overwhelmed by the complexity of the situation she had walked into. Whatever David had told her about the transition being smooth and manageable, the reality was proving to be far more challenging. Jessica, crisis management is one of the most difficult aspects of client relationship management. It requires technical knowledge, legal understanding, and the kind of trust that takes years to build. I'm starting to realize that I'm not qualified for this position, she said quietly. Not yet, anyway. Maybe not ever. It was an honest admission, and I found myself respecting her self-awareness. Jessica could have tried to fake her way through the crisis, or blamed others for her lack of preparation. Instead, she was acknowledging that she had been placed in a situation that exceeded her current capabilities. "What do you want to do?" I asked. "I want to do whatever is best for Summit's clients, even if that means admitting that I'm not the right person for this role." Thursday brought the conversation with Michael that would determine the future of everyone involved. He called me into his office with a grim expression that suggested he had reached some difficult conclusions about the situation. "Rachel, I've completed the investigation into the security breach. The evidence clearly shows that David used your credentials to access client files on multiple occasions over the past 6 weeks. We've also confirmed that detailed client information was shared with at least 2 competing agencies. What are the legal implications? Potentially severe. We're consulting with our attorneys about criminal charges and civil liability. More immediately, we're facing the possibility of losing several major clients due to the breach of confidentiality." Michael paused, clearly struggling with what to say next. "Rachel, I owe you an apology. I allowed myself to be convinced that restructuring your role was in the company's best interests, but I now realize that decision was based on information that was deliberately misleading." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that David manipulated this entire situation to serve his own purposes. He undermined your reputation, compromised client confidentiality, and put Summit's future at risk. And I was foolish enough to believe his version of events." I waited, sensing that Michael had more to say. "I'm also saying that Jessica is a talented young marketer, but she's not prepared to manage the kind of complex client relationships that you've built over the past 8 years. The clients are making that very clear." For the first time since this crisis began, I felt like I had some control over the outcome. "What do you want to do about it?" I asked. "I want to offer you a partnership in Summit Marketing Solutions, effective immediately. I want you to resume full responsibility for your major client accounts. And I want Jessica to work under your supervision until she's developed the skills necessary to manage complex B2B relationships independently." It was everything I could have hoped for, but it came with complications that couldn't be ignored. "Michael, what about David's role in all of this? Are you planning to pursue legal action?" "That depends partly on what our clients decide to do. If they choose to pursue legal remedies for the breach of confidentiality, we'll support their efforts fully. If they're satisfied with our internal response, we may choose to handle this as a civil matter." "And Jessica?" "Jessica has offered to step down from the senior marketing director position. She's asked to be reassigned to a junior role where she can develop her skills without the pressure of managing major accounts she's not prepared for." I had to admit that Jessica's willingness to acknowledge her limitations and accept a demotion showed more integrity than I had expected from someone who had been involved with my husband. Friday brought the resolution I had been working toward since this crisis began. I met with Patricia Williams, Robert Hayes, and Amanda Foster to present Summit's response to the security breach and our plan for preventing future incidents. "The unauthorized access has been completely eliminated," I explained. "We've implemented additional security protocols, changed all system passwords, and engaged a cybersecurity firm to conduct ongoing monitoring. More importantly, the individual responsible for the breach no longer has any access to Summit systems or client information." Patricia leaned forward. "Rachel, what assurances can you give us that this won't happen again?" "I can assure you that Summit is taking this breach seriously, and that we've implemented security measures that exceed industry standards. But more than that, I can assure you that I personally will be managing your account going forward, with the same attention to confidentiality and security that you've come to expect." Robert Hayes spoke up. "Rachel, What's happening with the personnel changes we heard about? Are you staying in your current role? I've been offered a partnership in Summit Marketing Solutions, which means I'll have even more authority to ensure that our clients receive the level of service and security they deserve. Amanda Foster smiled for the first time since the crisis began. So you're not going anywhere? I'm not going anywhere. Summit is my professional home, and maintaining your trust is my highest priority. By the end of that meeting, all three clients had agreed to continue their relationships with Summit. The crisis that David had created to destroy my career had instead resulted in my promotion to partner and the strengthening of the client relationships he had tried to undermine. That evening, as I sat in my office reviewing partnership documents and planning the restructuring of our client management processes, I realized that David's betrayal had ultimately made me stronger professionally than I had ever been before. His attempt to sabotage my career had forced me to prove my value in ways that had been unnecessary when my position was secure. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to destroy my professional life, David had actually helped me build the strongest foundation I had ever had. The following Monday morning brought news that would change everything at Summit Marketing Solutions. I had barely settled into my office with my coffee when Lisa rushed in with her phone in hand, looking simultaneously excited and concerned. "Rachel, you need to see this. Tom Henderson just posted on LinkedIn." She handed me her phone, and I read the post that would begin what would later be called the most dramatic client exodus in Austin marketing history. After 8 successful years with Summit Marketing Solutions, Henderson Industries has decided to follow Rachel Martinez to her new venture. Some relationships transcend business partnerships. They become family. When someone has helped build your company from $2 million to $15 million in annual revenue, loyalty isn't just smart business. It's the right thing to do. Congratulations to Rachel on her partnership at Summit, and thank you for making Henderson Industries what it is today. I stared at the post, feeling a mixture of gratitude and anxiety. Tom had made our professional relationship public in a way that demonstrated just how personally invested our clients were in working with me specifically, not just with Summit as an agency. "There's more," Lisa said, taking back her phone and scrolling to another post. "Look at what Patricia Williams shared an hour ago." Patricia's post was even more direct. "Williams & Associates has worked with Rachel Martinez for 6 years. In that time, she has helped us navigate legal marketing challenges, crisis communications, and strategic growth initiatives that have transformed our practice. Rachel recently became a partner at Summit Marketing Solutions, and we couldn't be more thrilled to continue our partnership with someone who understands that trust and expertise can't be replicated or replaced." By 10 o'clock, my phone was ringing constantly. Robert Hayes called first. "Rachel, I saw Tom Henderson's post on LinkedIn, and it got me thinking. Hayes Construction Group has been working with you for 5 years, and in that time, you've become more than our marketing director. You've become a strategic advisor who understands our industry, our values, and our long-term goals. I wanted you to know that wherever you are, we want to be there too." Amanda Foster's call came 20 minutes later. "Rachel, I've been reading the LinkedIn posts about your partnership at Summit, and I realized I never properly thanked you for what you did during the pandemic. When Foster Tech was struggling and I was honestly considering shutting down the company, you didn't just manage our marketing. You became part of our team. You helped us pivot our entire business model and find new markets we never would have discovered on our own. I don't care what agency name is on the contract. I care about working with you." By noon, I had received similar calls from 8 of my major clients. Each conversation followed the same pattern. The clients weren't just expressing support for my partnership at Summit. They were making it clear that their loyalty was to me personally, and that they would follow me wherever my career took me. Michael appeared in my office doorway just as I was finishing a call with David Chen from Chen Electronics, another long-term client who had built his business around the marketing strategies we had developed together. "Rachel, we need to talk," Michael said, closing the door behind him. "I've been getting calls all morning from clients, and they're all saying the same thing." "What are they saying?" "They're saying they work with Rachel Martinez, not with Summit Marketing Solutions. They're making it very clear that their contracts and their loyalty are tied to you personally." I could see that Michael was processing the implications of what this meant for the agency. Summit had built its reputation and client base largely around the relationships I had cultivated over 8 years. If those clients were more loyal to me than to the company, it meant that Summit's value was largely dependent on my continued presence. "Michael, these are relationships I've built over years of consistent service and results. The clients trust me because I've earned that trust through performance and reliability. I understand that. But Rachel, what I'm hearing from these clients is that they're prepared to leave Summit if you're not managing their accounts. That's not just loyalty. That's complete dependence on a single employee." It was a fair point, and one that I had been thinking about since the LinkedIn posts started appearing. The strength of my client relationships was both an asset and a potential liability for Summit. It demonstrated my value to the company, but it also meant that the company was vulnerable if I ever decided to leave. "What are you concerned about?" I asked. "I'm concerned that Summit has become too dependent on one person. If something happened to you, or if you decided to start your own agency, we could lose the majority of our major clients overnight." Michael was articulating the very realization that had been growing in my mind since the security breach crisis. The client relationships I had built were not transferable assets that belonged to Summit. They were personal and professional bonds that existed because of trust, expertise, and years of consistent performance. "Michael, what are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that we need to discuss what it would take to ensure your long-term commitment to Summit. These client relationships represent the foundation of our business. We need to structure a partnership that reflects that reality." This was the conversation I had been waiting for since David's sabotage attempt began. Michael was finally understanding that my value to Summit was not just about executing marketing campaigns or managing client communications. My value was about the trust and loyalty I had earned from clients who saw me as an integral part of their business success. "What kind of partnership structure are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking about a 50-50 partnership with shared ownership of the company. Your client relationships and expertise, combined with my business development and operational management, could make Summit the dominant marketing agency in Texas." It was a generous offer, more generous than I had expected, but it also came with complications that I needed to consider carefully. "Michael, that's a significant offer, but I need to ask you something directly. How do you think Jessica and David fit into this picture?" Michael's expression darkened. "Jessica has submitted her resignation. She realized that she was brought into a situation under false pretenses, and she doesn't want to be associated with the circumstances that led to her hiring. She's planning to look for opportunities that are better suited to her current skill level." "And David?" "David is facing potential criminal charges for unauthorized system access and theft of proprietary information. Our attorneys are recommending that we cooperate fully with any law enforcement investigation. Beyond that, I never want to see him near this building again." The finality in Michael's voice suggested that he had fully grasped the extent of David's betrayal and its potential impact on Summit's reputation and client relationships. "Michael, I appreciate the partnership offer, and I'm definitely interested in discussing it further. But there's something we need to address first." "What's that?" "The client exodus that's about to happen isn't just about loyalty to me. It's about clients recognizing that they have options, and that their business relationships should be based on value and trust rather than convenience or habit." Michael looked confused. "What do you mean by client exodus? The clients are supporting your partnership at Summit." "Michael, I've gotten 8 calls this morning from clients who are essentially saying they'll follow me wherever I go. That's not just support for my role at Summit. That's an indication that they see their relationship as being with me personally rather than with the agency. But they're not leaving Summit. They're expressing support for you staying at Summit. I realized that Michael was missing the larger implication of what the clients were telling us. They weren't just expressing loyalty to me. They were demonstrating that they had the power to choose where their business went, and that their choice was based on personal and professional relationships rather than corporate affiliations. Michael, what do you think would happen if I decided to start my own agency? The question hung in the air between us. Michael's face went pale as he began to understand what I was really asking. Are you considering starting your own agency? I'm considering my options. The events of the past few weeks have shown me that the relationships I've built have value that extends beyond any single company. The question is whether Summit wants to be the company that benefits from that value, or whether I should explore other opportunities. It wasn't a threat exactly, but it was a clear statement about the reality of the situation. Michael could offer me a partnership at Summit, or I could take my client relationships and start my own company. Either way, the clients had made it clear that they were prepared to follow me. Rachel, what would it take for you to commit to staying at Summit long term? It would take a partnership structure that reflects the actual value I bring to this company. It would take decision-making authority over client management and business development. And it would take assurance that I'll never again be subjected to the kind of professional sabotage that David orchestrated. Those all seem reasonable. What else? It would take acknowledgement that Summit's success is built on client relationships that require ongoing cultivation and protection. This isn't a business where you can simply hire someone new and expect the same results. Trust and expertise take years to develop. Michael nodded slowly. I'm beginning to understand that. The past few weeks have been an education in how complex client relationship management really is. Michael, there's one more thing. If we're going to be partners, I need to know that you understand the difference between what I do and what most marketing agencies do. I don't just execute campaigns for clients. I become part of their strategic planning process. I help them make business decisions that go beyond marketing. That level of involvement and trust can't be transferred to someone else overnight. I understand. And frankly, I should have understood that before I agreed to the restructuring plan that David proposed. We spent the next 2 hours discussing partnership terms, decision-making authority, and long-term strategic planning for Summit. By the end of the conversation, we had outlined a partnership structure that would make me an equal owner in the company while maintaining Michael's role in operations and business development. But even as we discussed the partnership, I knew that the real test would come from the clients themselves. The LinkedIn posts and phone calls had demonstrated their loyalty, but the ultimate measure of that loyalty would be their response to whatever decision I made about my future. That afternoon, I received a call that would crystallize everything. It was from James Mitchell, the CEO of Mitchell Technologies, a major tech company that had been trying to recruit Summit as their marketing agency for over a year. Rachel, I've been following the discussions on LinkedIn about your partnership at Summit, and I wanted to reach out with a proposition. What kind of proposition? Mitchell Technologies is looking for a marketing partner who can provide the kind of strategic guidance and client relationship management that you're known for. We've been impressed with the results you've achieved for companies like Henderson Industries and Foster Tech, and we'd like to discuss bringing you on as our primary marketing partner. It was exactly the kind of opportunity that could transform Summit from a regional agency into a major player in the Texas market. Mitchell Technologies was a $50 million company with ambitious growth plans and a marketing budget that would dwarf what any of our current clients were spending. That's an interesting opportunity, I replied. What kind of partnership are you envisioning? We're looking for more than just campaign execution. We want a marketing partner who can help us develop long-term strategic plans. James Mitchell's proposition was exactly what I had been hoping would eventually happen. Mitchell Technologies represented the kind of client that could transform Summit from a regional agency into a powerhouse that competed with the major firms in Dallas and Houston. But his timing was perfect for reasons he couldn't have known about. "We're looking for more than just campaign execution," James continued. "We want a marketing partner who can help us develop long-term strategic plans, understand our industry dynamics, and become an extension of our leadership team. From what I've seen of your work with Henderson Industries and Foster Tech, you understand how to build those kinds of comprehensive partnerships." I found myself smiling as I realized that James was describing exactly the kind of work I had been doing for years, but which David had convinced Michael was outdated and unnecessary. The very expertise that David had tried to eliminate was what distinguished me from other marketing professionals and what made clients willing to pay premium rates for my services. "James, that sounds like exactly the kind of partnership I specialize in. What timeline are you working with?" "We'd like to start discussions immediately. Mitchell Technologies is planning a major expansion next year, and we need a marketing partner who can help us enter new markets strategically rather than just throwing money at advertising and hoping for results. I'd be very interested in exploring this opportunity. Let me check my calendar and get back to you about setting up an initial meeting." After I hung up, I sat quietly in my office, processing what had just happened. The Mitchell Technologies opportunity represented validation that my approach to client relationship management wasn't just valuable to existing clients. It was attractive to major companies that could afford to work with any agency they chose. More importantly, it represented leverage in my discussions with Michael about the partnership structure at Summit. If I could bring in a client like Mitchell Technologies, it would demonstrate that my value to the company extended beyond maintaining existing relationships to actively growing the business. But there was something else happening that I hadn't fully anticipated. The LinkedIn posts and public demonstrations of client loyalty were creating a ripple effect throughout the Austin marketing community. Other agencies were taking notice of the unusual level of client devotion I had cultivated, and several had reached out about potential opportunities. Lisa knocked on my office door at 4 o'clock with a stack of messages. "Rachel, you've had 12 calls in the past 2 hours. 6 are from existing clients wanting to discuss expanded services. 4 are from potential new clients who saw the LinkedIn activity, and 2 are from other agencies asking if you're open to partnership discussions." The phones had been ringing nonstop since Tom Henderson's LinkedIn post had started a cascade of public support from my clients. What had begun as individual expressions of loyalty had turned into something much larger, a public demonstration of the kind of client relationships that most marketing professionals could only dream of building. "There's something else," Lisa continued. "I just got off the phone with Sarah Kim from the Austin Business Journal. She wants to interview you about client relationship management in the marketing industry. Apparently, the LinkedIn activity has caught the attention of business reporters who are interested in why clients are so publicly loyal to individual professionals rather than agencies. A reporter wanting to interview me about client relationships was both an opportunity and a potential complication. On one hand, media coverage of my client management approach could enhance my professional reputation and attract additional business opportunities. On the other hand, it could also create pressure and expectations that might be difficult to manage. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I'd check with you and get back to her. But Rachel, I think this interview could be really valuable. The way your clients have responded to the partnership announcement is unprecedented in this industry. People are talking about it." That evening, I decided to attend the monthly Austin Marketing Professionals Meetup, something I hadn't done in months due to my busy client schedule. I was curious to hear what other marketing professionals were saying about the LinkedIn activity and client responses. The meetup was held at a downtown hotel, and I arrived to find the usual crowd of agency owners, freelancers, and corporate marketing managers. But something was different. As soon as I walked in, conversations seemed to pause, and several people approached me directly. "Rachel, congratulations on the partnership at Summit," said Maria Santos, who owned a small digital marketing agency. "I have to ask, how did you build such strong client relationships? The LinkedIn posts from your clients are unlike anything I've ever seen in this industry." "Thank you, Maria. Honestly, it's been about consistency and genuine investment in my clients' success over many years. I don't think there's any secret formula beyond really understanding their businesses and being available when they need support." "But it's more than that," interrupted Carlos Rodriguez, who worked for a large corporate marketing department. "I've been following the posts and comments, and your clients aren't just satisfied with your services. They're emotionally invested in your success. That's not normal in professional services." Carlos was right, and his observation made me realize that what I had built with my clients went beyond typical vendor relationships. Somewhere along the way, I had become genuinely invested in their business outcomes, and they had become invested in my professional success. "I think it happens when you stop thinking of clients as accounts and start thinking of them as partnerships," I replied. "When Patricia Williams's practice grows, I feel proud of what we've accomplished together. When Robert Hayes lands a major construction project, I celebrate with his team. It's not just about delivering marketing services, it's about being part of their success stories." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with various marketing professionals asking questions about client retention, relationship building, and business development strategies. What struck me was how many of them seemed surprised by the concept of long-term client partnerships built on mutual trust and shared goals. As I drove home that evening, I realized that the events of the past few weeks had revealed something important about my professional identity. I had built something unusual and valuable in the marketing industry, not just expertise in campaign development and strategic planning, but the ability to create genuine partnerships with clients who trusted me as a strategic advisor rather than just a service provider. The next morning brought a call from Michael that would change the trajectory of everything. "Rachel, I got a call from Tom Henderson last night that I think you need to hear about." "What did Tom say?" "He asked me directly whether Summit was committed to keeping you as a partner long-term. He said Henderson Industries has been approached by 3 other agencies in the past week, all of them trying to poach his business by suggesting that Summit might not be the right home for someone with your reputation." The competitive implications of the LinkedIn activity were becoming clear. Other agencies weren't just noticing my client relationships, they were actively trying to use them to steal business from Summit by suggesting that I might leave or that the agency might not appreciate my value. What did you tell him? I told him that Summit is absolutely committed to our partnership and that we're restructuring the company to reflect your central role in our success. But Rachel, Tom said something else that really got my attention. "What was that?" "He said that if Summit ever let you go, or if you ever decided to start your own agency, Henderson Industries would follow you immediately, and he was confident that most of your other clients would do the same. He said your reputation in the Austin business community is such that you could probably launch a successful agency with a solid client base from day one." Tom's assessment was both flattering and sobering. It confirmed what I had begun to suspect, that my client relationships were strong enough to support an independent business if I chose to pursue that path. "Michael, what are your thoughts about that?" "My thoughts are that Summit needs to do whatever it takes to ensure that you never want to leave. Because frankly, losing you would probably mean losing the majority of our major clients and most of our reputation in the Austin market." It was a candid admission of Summit's dependence on my client relationships, and it provided exactly the leverage I needed to negotiate partnership terms that truly reflected my value to the company. "I appreciate your honesty about that. It helps clarify what kind of partnership structure would be mutually beneficial." We spent the next 3 hours negotiating terms that would make me a 50-50 partner in Summit Marketing Solutions, with equal decision-making authority and shared ownership of all business assets. More importantly, we structured the partnership agreement to include performance incentives that would increase my ownership stake as the company grew. By Thursday afternoon, we had a signed partnership agreement that transformed me from an employee to a co-owner of Summit Marketing Solutions. The announcement would be made the following Monday, along with a press release highlighting the company's commitment to client relationship management and strategic partnership development. But Friday brought a conversation that would make everything else seem insignificant by comparison. David called me directly for the first time since I had asked him to leave the house. His voice sounded strained, and I could tell immediately that something had changed in his situation. "Rachel, I need to talk to you about something important." "David, we don't have anything to discuss. You've caused enough damage already. Please just listen for a minute. I'm calling because Jessica ended our relationship yesterday, and I think you deserve to know why." Despite my better judgment, I found myself curious about what had happened between David and Jessica that would prompt him to call me. What happened? Jessica found out about the security breach investigation and my role in accessing Summit's client files. She said she couldn't be involved with someone who would sabotage his wife's career and put client confidentiality at risk. So Jessica had discovered the full extent of David's manipulation and had decided she didn't want to be associated with someone who would engage in corporate espionage to advance his personal agenda. "David, Jessica's decision doesn't change anything between us. What you did was unforgivable, both personally and professionally." "I know that. But Rachel, there's something else." Jessica told me that she had been offered a position at Apex Marketing Group, and she turned it down because she realized they had been trying to use information I provided to steal Summit's clients. This was new information, and it had significant implications for the security breach investigation. "What do you mean they had been trying to use information you provided?" "Rachel, I need to tell you the complete truth about what I did. It's worse than you know." David's confession took nearly 30 minutes, and by the end of it, I understood that his betrayal had been far more systematic and damaging than anyone had realized. He hadn't just accessed client files out of curiosity or concern for my workload. He had been systematically gathering confidential information and sharing it with Apex Marketing Group in exchange for a promise that they would hire Jessica at a senior level. The plan had been for Jessica to work at Apex using the client intelligence David provided, while I was either marginalized at Summit or forced to leave the industry entirely due to the loss of major clients. David would then divorce me, claiming that my career failures had destroyed our marriage, and he and Jessica would start fresh with her new high-paying position at a successful agency. "David, you're describing a criminal conspiracy to steal trade secrets and destroy client relationships." "I know, and I'm calling because I want to make it right. I've already contacted the FBI to report what I did and what Apex was planning to do with the information I provided." The revelation that David had been working with Apex Marketing Group to systematically undermine Summit's client relationships changed everything about the security breach investigation. This wasn't just unauthorized access to computer systems. It was corporate espionage designed to destroy a competitor's business. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Jessica made me realize what I had become. She said she couldn't be with someone who would destroy innocent people's livelihoods to advance his own interests. She said what I did to you was evil, and she was right." I sat quietly for a moment, processing the full scope of what David had revealed. His betrayal wasn't just personal. It was a calculated attack on my professional reputation, my clients' confidential information, and Summit's business relationships. "David, this doesn't change anything between us personally, but I appreciate you coming forward about Apex's involvement. That information could be crucial for protecting other agencies and clients from similar attacks. Rachel, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that seeing what you've accomplished, despite everything I did, has made me realize how wrong I was about you and your career." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I told myself you were holding me back, that your success made me feel inadequate, that you were too focused on work to be a good wife. But watching you handle this crisis, seeing how your clients responded to the partnership announcement, understanding what you've actually built over the past 8 years, I realize I was jealous of something I was too small-minded to appreciate." It was perhaps the most honest thing David had ever said to me, and while it didn't excuse his actions, it did provide some closure about his motivations. "David, I hope you can rebuild your life in a way that doesn't involve destroying other people's achievements. But we're done. This marriage is over, and I don't want any further contact unless it's required for legal proceedings." "I understand. Rachel, for what it's worth, I'm proud of what you've accomplished. You deserved better than what I gave you." The call ended with a strange sense of finality. David's confession had provided the last piece of the puzzle about his sabotage campaign, but it had also marked the definitive end of our relationship. Monday morning brought the announcement that would reshape Summit Marketing Solutions and establish a new standard for client relationship management in the Austin marketing community. The press release was distributed to local business publications, industry newsletters, and professional networks throughout Texas. It announced my partnership in Summit, highlighted the company's commitment to long-term client relationships, and positioned the agency as a leader in strategic marketing partnerships. But the real impact came from the client responses to the announcement. Tom Henderson posted a LinkedIn update that gained over 500 likes and 50 comments within 6 hours. "Congratulations to Rachel Martinez on her partnership at Summit Marketing Solutions. Henderson Industries is proud to continue our 8-year partnership with someone who has helped transform our business from a small regional player to a major competitor in the industrial equipment market. This is what happens when agencies prioritize long-term relationships over short-term profits." Patricia Williams shared a post that was even more influential within the legal community. "Rachel Martinez understands that legal marketing requires expertise, integrity, and genuine commitment to client success. Her partnership at Summit ensures that Williams and Associates will continue receiving the sophisticated marketing support that has helped us become one of Austin's leading personal injury practices." Robert Hayes posted a construction industry-focused update that resonated throughout the building and development community. Hayes Construction Group has worked with Rachel Martinez for 5 years, and in that time she has become an integral part of our strategic planning process. Her understanding of the construction industry and her ability to communicate our values to potential clients has been instrumental in our growth. Amanda Foster's post was particularly meaningful because it addressed the broader business community, rather than just the marketing industry. Foster Tech Solutions survived the pandemic and thrived in the recovery because we had a marketing partner who understood our business challenges and helped us adapt to changing market conditions. Rachel Martinez didn't just manage our marketing campaigns, she helped us reimagine our entire business model. By the end of Monday, the announcement and client responses had generated inquiries from 12 potential new clients, 3 partnership opportunities with other agencies, and interview requests from 5 business publications. Tuesday brought the Mitchell Technologies meeting that would demonstrate the full potential of what Summit could become with the partnership structure we had established. James Mitchell arrived with his CFO and marketing director, clearly intending this to be a serious business discussion rather than a casual exploration of possibilities. We met in Summit's main conference room, which Michael had upgraded specifically for high-level client presentations. "Rachel, I've been following the announcement about your partnership at Summit, and I'm impressed by the client loyalty you've built over the years. Mitchell Technologies is at a stage where we need exactly that kind of long-term strategic partnership." I spent the next 2 hours presenting a comprehensive analysis of Mitchell Technologies' market position, competitive landscape, and growth opportunities. But more importantly, I demonstrated the kind of strategic thinking and industry insight that had made my other client relationships so successful. Your expansion into the healthcare technology sector represents a significant opportunity, I explained. But it requires a marketing approach that's fundamentally different from your current B2B industrial focus. Healthcare decision-makers have longer sales cycles, more complex approval processes, and different risk tolerances. Our strategy would need to reflect those realities. James and his team asked detailed questions about market entry strategies, competitive positioning, and timeline expectations. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that they were evaluating Summit not just as a marketing vendor, but as a strategic partner who could help guide their expansion into new markets. Rachel, this is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need. What would a partnership with Summit look like in practical terms? I outlined a comprehensive partnership structure that would make Summit responsible for strategic planning, brand development, content creation, and market entry execution. The initial contract value would be $300,000 annually, with performance bonuses tied to specific growth metrics. We'd be looking at this as a multi-year partnership, James replied. Mitchell Technologies doesn't change marketing partners frequently. When we find someone who understands our business and delivers results, we tend to build long-term relationships. It was exactly what I had hoped to hear. Mitchell Technologies represented the validation that my approach to client relationship management could attract major new business opportunities, not just maintain existing relationships. Wednesday brought a call from the Austin Business Journal reporter who had been trying to schedule an interview about client relationship management in the marketing industry. Rachel, I've been following the response to your partnership announcement at Summit, and I think there's a broader story here about how professional services relationships are evolving. Would you be willing to discuss your approach to client relationship management? The interview lasted 90 minutes and covered everything from the importance of long-term thinking in client relationships to the role of personal trust in professional services. But the most significant part of the conversation focused on the changing dynamics of the marketing industry. What I've noticed over the past 8 years, I explained to the reporter, is that clients are increasingly looking for strategic partners rather than just service providers. They want marketing professionals who understand their industry, anticipate their challenges, and contribute to their long-term strategic planning. Is that why your clients have been so publicly supportive of your partnership at Summit? I think they've been supportive because they recognize that our relationships are built on mutual investment in each other's success. When their businesses grow, I feel genuinely proud of what we've accomplished together. When they face challenges, I'm personally committed to helping them find solutions. The interview would be published the following week in a feature article about client relationship management in professional services, with my story as the primary example of how personal trust and strategic expertise could create unusually strong business partnerships. Thursday brought the resolution of the criminal investigation into David's corporate espionage activities. FBI agents had concluded their investigation into the conspiracy between David and Apex Marketing Group, and the results were more significant than anyone had anticipated. David's cooperation with the investigation had revealed that Apex had been systematically targeting successful marketing agencies throughout Texas, using compromised employees or contractors to steal client information and strategic intelligence. Summit had been just one of several agencies that had been infiltrated as part of a larger competitive intelligence operation. The investigation resulted in federal charges against 3 executives at Apex Marketing Group, including conspiracy to commit corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, and wire fraud. David had been granted immunity in exchange for his cooperation, but he would be required to testify in the criminal proceedings. More importantly for Summit, the investigation had uncovered evidence that Apex had been planning to use the stolen client information to launch a coordinated attack on several Austin agencies, designed to destabilize the local marketing industry and position Apex as the dominant firm in the region. "The good news," explained Detective Sarah Martinez, who had been leading the investigation, "is that your quick response to the security breach prevented Apex from executing their plan. They never got the chance to use the information they had stolen because you identified the breach and took protective measures immediately. The investigation's conclusions provided complete vindication for my handling of the security crisis and demonstrated that the protective measures we had implemented had prevented a much larger disaster. Friday brought the culmination of everything that had been building since David's initial sabotage attempt. Mitchell Technologies had accepted Summit's partnership proposal, with a 3-year contract worth nearly $1 million in total revenue. 2 other major companies had submitted requests for strategic marketing partnerships based on the Business Journal article and client referrals. And Summit had been approached by a major Dallas agency about a potential merger that would create one of the largest marketing firms in Texas. But the most satisfying moment came when Tom Henderson called with news about Henderson Industries' most successful quarter in company history. "Rachel, I wanted you to be the first to know that we just closed our biggest contract ever, a $5 million manufacturing agreement that came directly from the marketing campaign you developed for us last year." The client specifically mentioned our thought leadership content and industry reputation as deciding factors in choosing Henderson Industries over our competitors. Tom's success represented validation that the marketing strategies we had developed together weren't just maintaining his business, they were actively driving growth and creating new opportunities. "Tom, that's incredible news. I'm so proud of what Henderson Industries has accomplished. Rachel, I need you to understand something. This success is as much yours as it is ours. The strategic thinking, the market positioning, the content, development. All of that came from the partnership we've built over the past 8 years. You didn't just execute marketing campaigns for us. You helped us become the company we are today." As I sat in my office that evening, reviewing partnership documents and planning strategic initiatives for Summit's expansion, I realized that David's betrayal had ultimately led to the strongest professional position I had ever held. His attempt to undermine my career had forced me to prove my value in ways that had been unnecessary when my position was secure. His sabotage had demonstrated the strength of my client relationships and revealed opportunities for growth that I might never have pursued otherwise. The irony was perfect. In trying to destroy my professional life, David had actually created the circumstances that allowed me to build something better and stronger than what I had before. 6 months later, Summit Marketing Solutions had grown from a regional agency with 40 employees to a statewide firm with over 70 staff members and offices in Austin, Dallas, and Houston. The client relationships that David had tried to destroy had become the foundation for the most successful marketing agency in Texas. Jessica had found a position with a smaller agency where she could develop her skills without the pressure of managing major accounts she wasn't prepared for. She had sent me a note thanking me for handling the transition professionally and wishing Summit continued success. David had relocated to California, where he was working in IT support while dealing with the ongoing legal proceedings related to the Apex conspiracy. I had heard through mutual friends that he was in therapy and trying to rebuild his life in a more honest and constructive way. The final vindication came when Summit Marketing Solutions was named Austin's Marketing Agency of the Year by the local business community, with specific recognition for our innovative approach to client relationship management and strategic partnership development. As I accepted the award, I thought about everything that had led to this moment. David's betrayal had been devastating at the time, but it had also forced me to discover strengths I hadn't known I possessed and to build relationships that were stronger than I had ever imagined possible. The best revenge I had learned wasn't revenge at all. It was building something so successful and fulfilling that the person who had tried to destroy you became irrelevant to your story. Standing on that stage, surrounded by clients who had become genuine partners and colleagues who had become friends, I realized that David had ultimately given me a gift. He had forced me to stop settling for security and to start building something extraordinary. The client exodus that he had hoped would destroy my career had instead become the foundation for the most successful chapter of my professional life. The relationships he had tried to undermine had proven to be stronger than any sabotage attempt, and the reputation he had tried to damage had emerged from the crisis more respected and recognized than ever before. Looking back, I could honestly say that losing David had been the best thing that ever happened to my career. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.